So welcome this morning to what will be an outstanding program, particularly given what has been happening in the world over the last couple months and also this week in the United States. This is a critical time for us to reflect on the issues of caring and compassion, empathy, and selfless service. And that will be the focus of this program. We have an outstanding panel, and welcome to this program.
Thank you, Karen. We're also, first of all, very grateful. I'm Connie Corley, and I'll be sort of, if you will, the host introducing our panel and moderating the chat, except when I'm speaking. But we're grateful to Fielding, Hillary Lynn, who's the fearless head of alumni, Katrina Rogers, our president, who's here to hear what we're doing, and also Elena Nicholson, who is our head of development. So thank you all for being here and for all of our participants. So we're going to talk about the intergenerational transmission of seva, and seva means selfless service. How do elders model selfless service in South Asian homes for children? Our team, as you see down at the bottom of the screen, is Laura Sherwood. Laura is a doctoral candidate in human development at Fielding, also the founder of Transformative Arts Project. We have Dibendu Ghosh. Dr. Ghosh is an alum of Fielding with his PhD in human development and an ISI fellow. And David Blake Willis, who is our this esteemed doctoral faculty in HOD at Fielding, and he's our expert scholar on Asia. Oops. So, planting seeds, nurturing butterflies. That's the title of our project, and the acronym, not acronym, our short version is Seeds and Wings, funded by Fielding Graduate University Faculty Research Grant. Our focus is on examining lives impacted by seeds planted by social activist visionaries in countries where poverty, discrimination, exploitation have impacted the well-being of children, and those two countries are Nepal and India. Our purpose is to illuminate a new understanding of the connections between individual motivations, such as altruism and empathy, with developmental processes, in this case, emerging adulthood. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. Our goal is to improve the lives and communities through fostering a greater understanding of the value of exposure and integration of Eastern and Western cultural values, while highlighting sustainable practices that can be adapted in new environments. So our partner organizations are two homes for children, one in Rishikesh, India, Ramana's Garden, and it's from their website, a children's home on the banks of the Holy Ganges with a school and organic cafe. It offers a vision that every child, regardless of caste or creed, has the right to home, proper nutrition, quality education, and primary health care. Unatti Foundation is the host organization for Unatti Home for Children, and it's a nonprofit organization that provides comprehensive programs for girls in Nepal who live in vulnerable situations. So the origin of this project is that I was drawn to how do people who are Westerners get engaged with these projects and found amazing organizations like the two programs we'll be talking about, and how does this concept, which comes from Hinduism, of seva or selfless service, how does that relate to what in sort of a Western concept is altruism? So I recruited our team members, who I already introduced you to, Laura Sherwood, Dibendu Ghosh, and David Blake Willis. We are all students of human development, and so we wanted to explore the concept of emerging adulthood and how it applies to children growing up in a group setting, as well as incorporating life course theory of Glenn Elder. And then the concepts of seva were written about by Ram Dass, and I got reintroduced to his work about 15 years ago when I was out on medical leave for stress-related problems. This was prior to Fielding, and one of the reasons I decided to come to Fielding is to have a different kind of way to do the work that I find valuable, such as this project. So Ram Dass, who used to be Richard Alpert, a former Harvard professor who, along with Timothy Leary, ended up being dismissed from Harvard in the 60s, and Ramdas went to India and is known for the book and really the concept Be Here Now. So that was the inspiration for launching this project, which we wrote our proposal 2 years ago. So our initial plan was to go on site to each of the projects, but then COVID came along. So we shifted from an on-site ethnographic study to virtual interviews of founders, donors, and graduates of the program, as well as key administrators. Dibendu Ghosh made a field visit in December 2021. Laura was able to go to Nepal at the end of March for almost a week. And then we have about 15 hours of Zoom interviews, plus looking at websites and other social media posts of these two organizations. Some challenges were the time difference. So here it's 7 a.m. in Los Angeles, where I live in the Los Angeles area. And there were many interviews that had to be done at 7 a.m. on a Saturday or Sunday to accommodate evening time when people were available in India or Nepal. Also, some of the young adults were a little shy about talking. This idea of having an interview was really something some of them were not that familiar with, and we wanted to respect their privacy, but they really did open up over time. We wanted to contribute to theories about development, and also how do intergenerational and intercultural exchange improve quality of life for many. And this followed up on a social transformation project, Cruzando Puentes, which is in one of the Fielding monographs on resilience. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the theories, especially emerging adulthood. So, but we wanted to see how theories will help us understand historical and cultural dimension impacting the trajectories of young adults, and how they exemplified resilience and creativity in the face of adversity. So just very briefly, emerging adulthood is a new concept for late teens through their 20s, very Western orientation, where young people have a time for identity exploration, and it requires culturally supported independent role exploration. So in a country like the United States, we encourage young people to move away from home and go to school and so on, and start their own lives. But in Asian cultures, traditionally, family and collective orientation is much more emphasized. And of course, when you have children who did not grow up in a nuclear family, but in a home, how did this concept differ? And we're going to focus more perhaps on Glenn Elder's life course theory. And Dibendu is going to spend more time on how some of these principles come together, but there are 5. I'm just going to name the 5: agency, lifespan development, time and place, timing, and linked lives. And essentially, this is really a way in which history, which is like cultural and social historical circumstances, so historical time and individual biographical time, it's that intersection, and also how across the life course these different elements come together, and especially this idea of linked lives. So these are our programs again: Unatti, Home for Girls in Bhaktapur, which is near Kathmandu, Nepal. Ramana's Garden is in Rishikesh, that's in the northern part of India and the Himalayas. And some of the children still have parents, but they're living apart from the children, who were given the opportunity for a better living situation, better schooling, nutrition, clothing, and housing. And in this way, their family, their brothers and sisters, became their fellow residents. Typical trajectory for teens in rural areas would be early marriage, having multiple children, limited education, and early labor force participation. And again, Dibendu is going to talk more about that as well. So the historical and cultural context of Nepal and India. So as I mentioned, Rishikesh is in the northern part of India, and the border between India and Nepal is very open. So there's a flow of labor as well as trafficking of girls and women. So a number of the residents at Ramana's Garden are actually from Nepal. So there's very low literacy rates, especially in Nepal. Early marriages impact females in particular and limit opportunities. Child labor is prevalent. In India, it's the highest in the entire world. Children are sent out to beg or steal or misuse money by parents. So you'll hear a bit about how one of the founders was so moved by seeing these children that she was led to found Ramana's Garden. Lots of poverty and malnutrition. There are slums in both of those areas that we've worked with, and discrimination against Dalits, which many people call the untouchables. David's done a lot of work in this area, and we are grateful to his expertise here. So again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because Dibendu will really share much more, but child labor impacts the child's body, their ability to attend school, and then poor schooling reduces chances of further education and training and thus employability. So many young people drop out of school, and especially in these areas where children are often the breadwinners for their families. So I want to just highlight, and we'll hear in a documentary, which we'll be seeing after Dibendu speaks next, and then Laura will share about her experiences, and then we'll see a documentary about the two founders, Stephanie Waisler-Rubin, who's on the right. She founded Unatti, and the first girls arrived in March of 2002 in Nepal to their home. And Prabhavati Dwaba, she's an American actress. You'll see, this is a picture on the left that I got from Facebook, women who turn darkness into light. And she came to India in the 1990s, and then she ended up staying. So I wanted to highlight in our preliminary analyses, what are some of the ingredients for this intergenerational transmission of seva or service? How did these two women, both of them Westerners, who came to Nepal, how have they made a difference so that these young people also have this concept of seva, of giving? So first of all, these elder, at least now, elders, Stephanie Waisler-Rubin was not an elder, well, neither of them were when they founded, but their continuing influence as they're in their 50s and 70s has had quite an impact on many young people now, many young adults. So the first is they became mentors or role models for their younger family members. As I mentioned, everyone was considered to be family, even the staff. So these young people have been mentored by the founders. And often when we ask who influenced you, they would cite Stephanie or Prabhu, which was the nickname for Dr. Dwaba. Opportunities for learning and growth, major focus on education, including supporting going to school beyond what the equivalent of high school in each of these countries. And in the case of Unatti, they instituted a program that they were able to finally launch now that COVID has subsided more, going to different areas and giving guidance on menstruation and pregnancy for young girls. Nutrition at Ramana's Garden, they have an organic garden and cafe, and they're very interested in sustainable practices. There's a lot of opportunities for these young people to heal from trauma, to be able to voice and get support for what they've experienced, whether it's abuse or living on the streets or trafficking. And then there's lifelong learning. So there's a great value for the young people who live in these homes. The donors often will come and visit, or just in the case of Rishikesh, Ramana's Garden, one way that I heard about it was at a yoga festival where people would go over, and you'll hear a bit about that from one of the donors, and this concept of bhakti or devotional yoga. They would come and do chanting with the children, and then other volunteers would come and bring expertise. It might be some kind of art or craft, but there's a rich interchange and cross-cultural learning. So this sense of feeling nurtured, of feeling like being in a family, lots of talk about feeling loved, supported, and being a brother or sister to many. And finally, embodying these values, the focus on service within the home setting, but also beyond in the community. In both of these programs, for example, in Nepal, there was an earthquake, I think it was maybe about 6 years ago in Kathmandu, and these young children were out helping other people. That's one example. So what's really important, and I think relevant in particular to our conference, is that sustainability is multifaceted. So one of the things that happened during the pandemic is people were not visiting India and Nepal. But ironically, creative ways were found to do fundraising, offering programs virtually. The young people became much more tech savvy. So instead of having people coming in on tours and visiting on site, a lot of people got, probably more people had the opportunity to see these programs through virtual offerings. And what has happened, so for example, Mandy, one of the young women at Rishikesh, who studied fashion design, she ended up staying and is helping as part of the staff, but she decided to use natural products. So all of her materials are made out of cotton or related fabrics, and these are prints that are using plants instead of dyes. So they were able to adapt to these situations. She also said, you know, let's reuse a lot of the clothes. Why should we always be looking for new things? We can make new things out of clothing that's no longer wearable. There were many, many political issues, more so that we heard about in Rishikesh. Local officials and even sometimes you know, families were told that their children, you know, would not be well served. In one case in Rishikesh, they had to close their site and reopen again. But creating new initiatives, Unatti has a series on YouTube called Cooking with the Unatti Girls, and they put these programs together. Also had a virtual art show and sale of photographs. So I wanted to pause here and ask if there are any questions. I can't see the chat, so I've asked David to monitor it so that I can answer any questions. And as I said, we'll have Dibendu Ghosh up next, Laura Sherwood. They'll be talking about their visits and related concepts. And David Blake Willis will offer some observations and insights. And then we'll have a documentary that's in progress, the founders and donors of our project, as well as any time remaining for discussion. So I'm going to stop my share and see if there are any questions. Doesn't look like there are any in the chat, but
we have some folks who have just joined also,
Okay.
Connie. I want to welcome,
yes,
of course, Reed and Carl, Keely, and Caroline, and Rule, and Gail, and Gigi. So thank you all so much for joining us. Feel free to put your questions or comments into the chat at any time. I'll be monitoring that.
great to see everybody. Welcome. Well, I think we'll go ahead then, and Dibendu, if you want to get ready and share your screen. Dibendu, I think 2/3 of your faculty committee are here. David Blake Willis as chair, and I think I remained as your mentor. I was your first mentor, and I have this expression: once a mentor, always a mentor. So.
Yeah, and imagine my predicament when you have to present after your mentor has just done. Am I able to share my screen? I can see my screen. Is it all good?
We don't see it yet. So you click the green button, share screen.
Okay, just a minute.
Dibendu is coming to us today from Johannesburg in South Africa, where he says it's chilly.
Is it good now?
We still can't
Not
see it.
yet.
You have to click on the actual PowerPoint. on that.
I've done that. I can see it on my screen. Oh,
Okay,
this is always so difficult.
all right.
You
Well-
first open, Dibendo, you first open your PowerPoint presentation,
Okay.
and then on Zoom, there is a green button says share screen.
There
Oh,
we go.
okay, it's coming up now. There we go. All right. And then I'm going to mute myself, and it looks like everybody already knows the routine here. So take it away, Devindu.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the time. Generally, whenever I'm required to present something and I'm given 5 minutes, I will struggle to fill it up. I always think, what am I going to say? But today, time will be short because I will hardly be speaking. I'll actually be providing you with narrative evidence. So this is why we are here. I have already been introduced. Child labor is a passion for me and pain also. This is very important for me, which I actually understood while my dissertation. Poverty, okay, sometimes I'm taken to task by my friends in India. Poverty is man-made, intentional. Poverty is a result of poor planning, corruption. Poverty is not something which just happens. So, but that is not really part of what I'm presenting today, but there's a backdrop to what Dr. Dwaba did, Dr. Stephanie did. So just keep this in mind. This poverty cycle is intergenerational. And just like as I'll be going forward with seva, poverty is also intergenerational and intentional. So this was my dissertation. My dissertation was on child labor. I have personally witnessed child abuse, severe child abuse, which always makes me extremely emotional. And due to COVID, I had many plans to work in India, but due to COVID, much has been interrupted. There's a lot in my presentation and very little time, so I'll just go ahead. So this is what I found in the dissertation. With a small amount of grant, or you call them as conditional cash transfers, you can keep children in school. And if children are in school, they will not come out to work. What happens is that due to family pressure or due to the schools not being so good, people come out and they start working, and that's the end of the story. Once you have got into work, you get into that vicious circle where you don't have skills. As you're growing up, you're not being paid enough, so you have to send your children to work, and the vicious circle continues. So in this presentation, I'll be using the life course theory, which as my conceptual framework, which Dr. Kohli has already mentioned. I'll illustrate how Dr. Dwaba and Stephanie, two white, educated Western women, came to India and Nepal and founded the homes, the South Asian homes that was mentioned in the title. And I will cite their work as one way of creating an equitable future by providing social and economic justice, which is the theme of this conference. And in conclusion, which is really my most interesting part of this presentation, I'll present Gagan to you and his narrations to you. I interviewed him along with Dr. Kohli, and it was such a huge inspiration, not only because of what Gagan has become, how he speaks, but it's a manifestation of how, in effect, you can bring social justice and equity. Dr. Kohli mentioned, that's why it's always difficult after the mentor. It is still, I have put in here 4 key concepts, but it's that another concept, just brought together, but actually 5 or 4 concepts, they are all the same. So what I'm saying here is that, and this I will try to link in Gagan's story with the concept of seva. Fine, lives are embedded in historical and empirical contexts. We know that, but Dr. Dwaba and Dr. Stephanie understood that, and then they provided the opportunity to these disadvantaged children to have their own agency and motivate them to change themselves. And actually in Gagan's life, you will find that it has impacted him and the transition has occurred. So all of this is coming together, the concept of seva, the concept of the life course theory. I mean, what are you what will you put selfless service, but what are you going to serve? You are going to put in through your seva what is lacking in this children's life, either resources, material resources, intellectual resources, money, whatever. So this life course theory offers a very simple but very concrete and intricate understanding of of societies where social and economic injustice exists. And which I was just mentioning, the link between seva and life course theory. Seva is a Hindi word. It's basically service, especially altruistic service, which Dr. Prabhavati and Dr. Stephanie did, as you will find in our Seeds and Wings research. In the context of conceptual framework of the life course theory with their seva, this is what I'm trying to link. They both recognized and then provided the means to change those historical and empirical contexts. You'll find that in Gagan's story. By providing them a safe environment and education, simple things, safe environment and education, not really a lot, which really does not require a lot of money, funds or something, and which creates the agency, and then they motivate themselves and acquire skills and create empowering social relationships, which leads to transitions. And this evidence, I think I'll be able to provide very strong evidence, even in a qualitative research, or rather because of the qualitative research, in Gagan's narration, which is coming up shortly. So this is Dr. Prabhavati. You have seen the picture before. And this is Dr. Stephanie Teller. You go to their websites, there's a lot there. There's no problem on that. You can find all details there. But both of them have done yeoman service. In seva, this is important. This is there in the title of this conference, but somehow later on it was missed or whatever. In seva, you give tan, man, and dhan. So these are three Hindi words. Tan is physical labor. Man means empathy, when you're putting your mind into it. And dhan, which is of course donation, money, resources, whatever. But remember, when you are doing seva, you're getting two. You get back happiness. That is a very important concept of seva. And seva is actually penance. So more than what you are giving, you are actually getting. That's the most important concept of seva, call it altruism, whatever. If what is not seva is definitely, if it is done with expectation without your heart and soul into it. And I have done it now, I tell it to you later. Or getting bogged down by lack of appreciation or criticisms. And even most importantly, if you believe you have the right, what I'm doing is the best, there's nobody else. So I had my ISI fellows project undergoing, it was going on even when, but of course it was affected by COVID. But when I actually went over to Ramana's garden, I did feel that yes, what I'm doing is good, but what Dr. Dwaba done is perhaps better. And rather than me doing something on my own and thinking I'm doing it rightly, maybe just doing their something like many other donors are doing, maybe that's the right way of doing things.
Here they donate money to different organizations, and Ramana's Garden was always one of them. And then I knew people in the yoga community who would set up fundraisers and so on. And I thought how wonderful that people from the West coming to the East and then bringing the beauty and wisdom of the East to the West. So we were interested in both how people come to that kind of what we call altruism, or of course in Hinduism, seva, but also what's the experience like?
You know who that was. So this is Gagan. I had permission to use his picture, but I haven't. Because sometimes he's quite expressive in mentioning his difficulties. So I debated with Dr. Kohli on using his picture. I had taken his permission, but finally I decided against it. So this is Gagan for us. And Gagan's life story is an example of how seva provides the opportunity. And I link it back always, seva as done by Dr. Dwaba and Dr. Stephanie. And they understood that the concepts of life course theory and how they understood the context, and then provided what was needed to make a positive change, bring in social justice and equity in that context. And you will find how Gagan has now taken it off. Let him speak.
So, yeah, I was 2 when I came to Ramana's, and in 1995, we had a very big fight in, Maoist and the government of Nepal. So they were trying to take my parents, so that they could fight against the king. And my father and my parents, they hid. And but what they saw, like they told me the story. So what they saw was like the Maoists, they were coming and grabbing all the women's and also all the male members in the family. They were even training, I think, like 15 as young as 15 years old and 16 years old like kids to shoot and to do all of those things. And so finally my parents, they ran away from there, like when it settled down after a day. So they walked around, I think 7 days and nights. So after walking for a long distance, they came to a border in India. And then when they crossed the border, that time it was very easy to cross. So there were not many questions about and all of that. So it was quite easy to just go without any documents, and all of these things were possible at the time. So then they came to Lakshmanjura in search of work and in search of food and shelter, because they don't know, they were new at this place and they don't know, and they had me, I was quite small. So however, they ended up in Fulchatti, which is like 6 kilometers from where we stay, where Ramana's garden is. And that is the place, first time they met Prabhaji, our mom, who took care of us and who shelters us, and who is the founder and director of Ramana's garden.
In context of the historical context, you now understand what a challenging environment this boy was, and how Dr. Prabhavati understood the historical context and brought in changes.
So
after he has, I mean, Dr. Kohli was mentioning about emerging adulthood. Now, when he is into adulthood, he has understood this historical context, and which is giving him a sense of agency to thrive despite them.
What do you see right now are the biggest challenges for you at this time in your life, and not only in your job responsibilities, but it's like seeing yourself and your life going forward? What are some challenges like right now that you're managing?
I feel like we always do our field work outside. So I feel like one of the most challenging is like the caste system that exists in India. Even though there is there are things that there are provisions that say that there is no caste system, but still there is in the mentality of people. So we have to deal with that every day, and mostly about girls. So people, if they family always wants a boy because he can take care of the family when they get old, and a girl, she's supposed to go and marry others. So usually we only get 4 years. If we go outside to the poor people's house or anywhere, they always tell us, take my boy, take my child boy, educate him. But we always say no, we would like to educate only girls, and like mostly girls, which we educate both, but our priority is for girls only. So this is when they just say, we see in their face that they don't want to do that. It's so, but still we go and we say to them it's free for them. So they send the girls. So it's always about girls. They should always be working for a man in the house and taking care of the cows, and they should not be educated. We won't be benefited by them, and all of those things. someday their girl has to marry. So what they do in the villages is that they teach her how to cook, they teach her how to milk a cow, and they teach her how to take care of the husband and massage and all the daily things what she has to impress to make her husband happy and the mother-in-law and the father-in-law happy. But for me, my vision is that we want to educate a girl child so that she can stand on her own feet. Suppose someday a man he leaves her, then she can't take care of herself, because in many cases girls are always left alone. So
I hope this conveys his emancipation. I hope this conveys the intergenerational seva which he has learned from Dr. Dwaba and the education he has received. And most important, in such a patriarchal society, how this boy has now understood the importance of girls' education. More is to come.
we have a government official where we go. So we went to him, we went and we talked to him. We said we want to help the child and we would like to take care of them. And then what his answer was like, he said, they grow in shit, so they leave them there, something like that. They grow in shit, so leave them there. They should be in the shit and all of that. So that thing really, it meant that not everyone is trying to help. Not everyone is trying to, support. So that's when we found out that many things were, not under our control. So we'd have to see in all perspectives. We have to go through so much procedures and all of those things.
I come back to this fact that poverty is a way of life accepted and endured in India. Most importantly, I keep on saying this, it is intentional. It serves a particular group of people, a particular section of people. Even I live in an urban area in India. I mean, my parents, my friends would also like to have children working as domestic maids. If you tell them, well, this is wrong, they say that, look, otherwise they will be even far more worse off. That's an argument, but that is the argument which keeps communities perpetually poor. They are perennially they are kept as poor. So I also have faced these challenges in my ISI project when I say that, okay, fine, here is a cash conditional transfer for keeping the children in school. The question is, why are you interested? How does it help you? Gagan has now grown to be different. In this particular audio clip, I would like you to note that very poignant silence when I'm asking a question. And that was so important. And this is perhaps a very important also evidence that you can uncover in a qualitative methodology.
You are different. You appear to be different. You are appearing to be spreading organic culture, permaculture. You're talking of girls' education, and girls' education you're putting it at a higher priority over boys' education. Why do you think you're different?
Actually, I would say that what I have seen around, in the village, what I have been through, we have a lot of slums here. So I have been there. I've seen the people, how they treat women, first of all. Second, I've seen how my father was an alcoholic and he used to treat my mother really badly. And just to change that and empower a woman so that she not only can, stand on her legs, but she can also be on the same level as whatever the man can do. So by seeing all of this, and I will say that, yeah, somehow it has changed me and what I think, what I thought of life and what I would like to do in future.
Gagan has changed me. Gagan has given me evidence and I get emotional every time I hear this.
Are saying, no, do not stay in a better life. You come back to the life which is far worse than what you are there. These are actually parents who are doing. So what could be the motivation? What is the motivation behind bringing those children back into life of difficulty? What is the motivation?
The motivation, I would say that maybe it's a propaganda from the government. Maybe it's a propaganda. Maybe it's maybe also one of the things is that the father is always drunk, so he's unable to work. So whatever money he has, he always uses for drinking. So the mother is left alone. She can't cook by herself because she needs money to cook or to buy the food. So after that, she realizes that only if they would have a child, he or she could be gathering a garbage, and they could be selling it and the earnings would be like feeding the family. I think that is the main thing.
I have also struggled with lack of parental altruism in my project, both in my dissertation and in the ISI projects. There is a group of people who say that, look, not everybody sent their children to work. Yes, that is true. So is it true then that some parent would like to send their children to work so that it helps the family? Does that mean that there are some parents who would like to have more children so that they can send more children to work? Well, India, with the largest number of child laborers of the world, it's so difficult. It's so difficult. I don't know.
Are saying, no, do not stay.
This is where he has now matured. He has grown, and he has grown enough to understand that his growth is important, but it is also important because there are many girls where in Ramana's garden, if there is women empowerment, that is where the social and social justice would be more served, and he will be able to make the society more equitable.
In caste system, we have to tackle that also a lot by just educating the youth, because I feel like we can't change the mentality of our older people, like grandparents, or maybe you can say, let's say father, mother, because they have that mentality and they have always taught that. So we can't just tell them. But now we feel like the youth, we have to educate the youth so that they have their understanding level is broader way, and they can understand more than what our grandparents would understand.
I hope in this very short presentation, timing is always a problem. I have been able to come across to you to create an equitable future. It is essential to provide the disadvantaged with both social and economic justice. And economic justice and also social justice will only come from education and skills training, which visionary activities like Dr. Baba and Dr. Stephanie have provided. I have visited Ramana's garden and have seen, I mean, there is hardly any time to talk because Gagan is just one of them. There are so many there. And this also illustrates the, how in the life course theory, if you change the context and if you provide what is missing in the life of the disadvantaged, definitely social justice and an equitable future is possible. Thank you. I'll stop sharing. Is that good?
Yes, thank you, Divendu. It was wonderful hearing Gagan's voice again from our time with him. Laura Sherwood.
Hey, everybody. Let me just share my screen.
Also, feel free to put any questions in the chat. The questions can be answered in chat and or at the end of our presentations.
Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I am sharing, I'm sharing from the field theory to practice. So what I'll be sharing with you here is basically the visuals of when I was in Nepal and the experiences, because I think that Connie and Divendu have shared a lot of the theory, and seva is the the one thing that I got to observe first, hands-on in the field. So as my role was a student researcher, which I was blessed to work with all of these wonderful individuals on the team, and I participated with Connie doing interviews with Unatti, and also did an arts-based analysis, which my research is always, my dissertation looks at how we can use art in research and in the field and using the visual ethnography. So those were kind of the things that I did, was participating, identifying themes that you'll see at the end with the in the little documentary that we were putting together. We also did another one, which we shared earlier, and the stories, identifying the stories and pulling them together. So this little image here is so significant because each morning and each evening the girls sit together, and they line up by age. And so it's from the youngest to the oldest, and the oldest are in service to the youngest. And so it's such a beautiful system. They all know where they're sitting, they come in, and it's just organized, and they all wash their dishes, and they eat together, and it's just a lovely experience to witness. Let me see now, I've messed up I need to get rid of the view of everybody. Okay, and then this, I was invited, so Connie and I were doing our post interview with the founder of Unatti, Stephanie, and it was a couple weeks before she was hosting this, bringing the donors and the board members to Unatti, and she invited me to come and work with the girls to help them to learn, because one of the methods that I research is photo voice, and so it's putting cameras in the hands of vulnerable communities to tell their own stories. So while I was there, I had the privilege to work with the girls, and she really wanted me to help them to embody telling their own stories, and to teach them to do videos, and she requested specifically to, highlight some videos. So I'll be sharing those. And so the field observation. So when we talk about the seva, this is one of the donors coming, and she was such a big donor that allowed them to move into this big house that they put a plaque and named the house after her and her husband. So she's bringing them gifts, and they're celebrating her. And in this one, we had just gone to, these are some of the Unatti, they work there, and this is one of the older girls. So there's the older generation, which you'll see later, that has moved, transitioned out of Unatti house into independent living. And so she wanted me to work with some of them to help them understand how to do the videos and the photography, because as Connie said, they had created their own, food making and different videos. And this is all the girls' inspiration to do these things during COVID, to learn how to do photography, to learn how to do video, to learn art, and all the things that they learn. And it was just so beautiful to see the creativity within the house, and the love and the community that was fostered through this organization. So we had just come from doing, you'll hear at the end of our video is that where she talks about them going and doing community art. So we'd gone to a school in a rural area where we had presented and worked with some younger kids doing an art project. And so, and this I just want to share it because this is each day you walk into the house, and this is how you're greeted. So it's every time you walk into the house. And then I wanted to share this because this is each of the girls when they graduate or when they move out, as they become the older adults. They're given a photo book of their experience. So this is, this young lady when she came into Unatti, and Stephanie talks about her first 5 girls that moved in, and now it's grown to over 20 something. And so this is just kind of like their experience that they get to take with them. And, they continue to be a growing family of just beautifully empowered. And it's all through the service that's provided from Stephanie and donors and the aunties that are at the house that take care of the girls. And it's just such a beautiful thing to see how empowering it is to provide these girls education. And then it truly is the planting the seeds and watching them fly into these beautiful, beautiful wings. Because, I got to go to we talk about the pad project, which they do the menstruation project. And so we flew to another place in Nepal, and they we went into the slums where one of the young girls she's an older girl, and she had been there since she was 5, and now she's in her 20s, and she decided to move back home to the slums to support her family. But we went as a group and did a pad project where we did a pad making. They did sewing and menstruation, because still in many parts of India and Nepal, menstruation is so taboo, and there are many different, sometimes girls in villages are sent out to, sleep in, with the animals because of menstruation being so taboo and shameful, and all the things that are, the inability to, have access to resources such as pads and things. So they're teaching them how to make their own pads and do these things. So the next little slides that I'm going to show you is the videos of going into hands-on what they do, going into the homes, and one of the girls sharing a little bit of her story.
Unatti Foundation is an organization helping girls and their families since 2003, and we are here in this home because we are going to help them. We are going to sponsor them for their education. They lost their father. They lost their father, and after that, they have been living in the small room, and they are using that area for their cooking purpose as kitchen. They have sharing the property, and they also have house, but the in-laws are not giving them to stay with them in their own house. And the mother, she's due to domestic violence, she is not mentally sound. She doesn't have work also, so she is facing problems to bring her child, to manage food for them, to manage proper shelter for them, and to manage education for them.
Let me know that when she wraps herself in this, that she's wrapping herself in all of our love.
है उहाँले के भन्नुभयो भने जब तपाईले त्यो लगाउनुहुन्छ नि है त्यतिखेर चाहिँ हामी सबैजनाको मायालाई पनि तपाईले साथै लिइराख्नु भएको छ भनेर भन्नुभएको है तपाई आफैलाई र हाम्रो मायालाई है
Today, guys, we're gonna start changing some lives. Beautiful, 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 beautiful. I think she's happy today.
Namaskar, my name is Rosmi. I came to Unatti when I was 9. I came to Unatti because my father died when I was 5 and my mother couldn't take care of me on her own. And now Unatti is supporting me in my educations and giving me opportunity to do lots of creative works, and which I love doing it. I've loved art ever since I was very young, and right now I'm studying in grade 12 with the major of fine arts, and I love doing artwork a lot, like a lot, and especially with Unatti sisters, and Unatti has been helping me to pursue my dream of art. And they support me by bringing me new materials, something that I can work with and create something different. And I'm very grateful for Unatti and the sisters who are supporting me from Unatti.
Okay, so just with that, I really like to emphasize the importance of bringing in, my research and my passion is bringing in the visual arts, elevating the voices of communities, highlighting their experiences through, having them at the forefront of the research and of allowing their stories to shine through. So thank you for letting me be a part of this, and I'll pass it to Dr. Willis.
Thank you so much, Laura. I would like to emphasize that this was very recently that Laura was in India, and Nepal, I should say, and in the trying times that we're in during COVID. And Laura, I hope you've recovered from that. I know you got a little ill while you were there, but boy, you just keep powering ahead with all of this. We are talking here about modeling exemplars, gurus, as we call them in South Asia, ultimate teachers, people who are doing the work. And I appreciate this conference so much that the emphasis on social and ecological justice, looking across the world. We had some wonderful sessions earlier this week that our colleague Fred Steyer sponsored. We are having dialogue sessions on sustainability that have involved many, many people as well. So doing the work of social and ecological justice, doing the work of sustainability. I want to emphasize how this in the South Asian context is less about the individual and more about the community. So when you do seva, it's related directly to karma, to the building of merit, and there is no expectation of a thank you or gratitude, although you did hear those expressions from some of the members of these communities. In fact, this is quite interesting from a Western perspective. There is no word for thank you traditionally in Asian languages. There is no word traditionally in Asian languages for religion. This is all part of life. It is part of the life course, the life cycle. Of course you would do this. When I first went to Southern India 52 years ago, I asked people, how do I say thank you? And they looked very confused because the only word in Tamil, the South Indian language which I studied, for thank you is when someone has saved your life, you might use that word, nandri. Now it has become quite commonplace. So we see the influence of global cultures on Asian languages. We do have ways of saying thank you now in Asian languages. For example, in Japanese, arigato. I think many of you have heard that. In fact, it comes from Portuguese, obrigado, arigato, and was a concept that was introduced by folks from the West to India. The compassion, empathy, and selfless service, which Karen emphasized at the beginning of our presentation, is all about the spiritual foundations of that come from South Asia. Especially, we can find these in the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of the Lord, the Song of Love, which is one book in the Mahabharata, perhaps the longest epic poem in the world. Krishna and Arjuna are the feature of the Gita. Arjuna is the warrior, and Krishna is his charioteer. And of course, Krishna is also God. But Arjuna cannot understand why he is fighting, why he's in a war with his family members, with his relatives. And it all has to do with duty, which is another way to see seva, is duty. It's all about learning and growth as well. This idea of you should, of course, be giving to others, especially to family and to the group around you. In Japanese, we have a concept called amae, A-M-A-E, amae. Amae is all about the relationships between people. And this is embodied in India too. The idea of Amaya is not about dependence or independence, the binary which is so commonly discussed in human development in the West, but about interdependence. And it's about our agency, and it's about the agency of those around us, whether they are older or younger. So this idea of looking up to people, of the exemplars, the teachers, in Japanese we say sensei, the person who came before, which of course much of Japanese culture comes from India. When I first journeyed to India, on my return, I traveled through Southeast Asia and up through East Asia, went across Russia to Europe and back. All of the way to Japan, I saw India. India was everywhere because there had been this cultural transmission. This is very similar to our idea in our research project of intergenerational transmission of seva, the ideas of life course theory. And the reciprocal nature of this is really important to notice, that it's not just from one side to another, but it's from one side to the other and then back. So it's a cycle. It's a cycle of appreciation. Life course theory, of course, in Southern Asia is also related very much to the life stages, the 4 ashrama. The first one is when you are a student, the brahmachari, and the second, you're a householder, grihastha. Then you are expected to begin leaving your former world and walking in the forest, the vanaprastha. And then the last stage is the sannyasin, where you renunciate everything. But the first stages are about doing service to others. And I note the name of Ramana's Gardens founder, Prabhuvati Dwaba. Prabhuvati is another way to say Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth. And the idea is an enabling. It's not about money or gold, really, although the symbolism is often there, but it's more about enabling agency. And we could talk about it in social science terms as social and cultural capital would be a way to talk about it. So this power of service. There is a particular problem, however, in the South Asian context, and that's a jati or caste. Many of the folks in both Ramana's Garden and in Unatti are very far down on the caste system here. Well, we don't accept this any longer as inevitable. And the empowerment which the founders of Ramana's Garden and Unatti have given to these girls and giving them agency in helping to liberate them is a spectacular example of social and ecological justice at work. The Dan that Dibendu's Gagan was talking about, the gift, the idea of the gift, and there's no expectation of return on this. So they're able to rise above their Dalit status, many of these people. And I want to note also 2 final things. One is how India welcomes outsiders, and within India as well. So for example, Dibendu is Bengali. Dibendu went to Rishikesh, they welcomed him in Rishikesh at Ramana's Garden. Of course you will do this for folks who are coming from outside. And if you stay for a while, you actually become part of the fabric of the society there. So it's rather an insider-outsider status that we can see there. And finally, I'd like to note the Right Livelihood Award. I'm guessing down the line, Ramana's Garden or Unatti may be recipients of the Right Livelihood Award. This is the alternative Nobel Prize. And one of the folks that we work with in South India, Krishnamal Jagannathan, she's now 96 years old, and Krishnamal, we call her Amma, which is mother. Krishnamal Amma actually walked with Mahatma Gandhi and has done amazing social justice work. She is Dalit herself. She always says, when faced with difficulties and obstacles, in Tamil, she says, Yallam Seal Kadum, which means all will be done. Everything can be done. Everything can be done. And we see this, of course, too, with Ramana's Garden and Unatti. And thank you very much for the field work from Laura and Dibendu, just outstanding field work as well. So I'll leave my comments there, but this idea of cultural transmission is very important across the generations.
You know, David, one of the insights I just got from what you said is this cultural transmission it's mutual, and it just builds and, you know, creates this cycle of goodness in the world. And we all know we need much more of that. We actually have a documentary that Laura, it's still in process. We've got one more donor to include, but it's the two founders, Stephanie Waisler-Rubin, and then Prabhupati Dwaba, Deva Dwaba. And beyond that, some donor interviews. I think we'll only have time to hear from Stephanie and Dr. Dwaba, because it's about 24 minutes long, and it will get a little bit longer when we have one of the final donor interviews. But Laura, would you introduce it? And again, we'd love to have discussion in the chat, and anyone who wants to stay on beyond, you know, we'll stay for a few minutes beyond if necessary. So thank you, Laura, for your fine work. And also David, your comments, and Dibendu. I'm putting in the thanks because I want to start with that, and we'll end with gratitude as well.
Okay, I'm just gonna push play. So without introduction.
When I was in India, I didn't have any ideas of that I was going to make an impact. I mean, I was really there, you know, supporting my father, going to art shows, meeting with, you know, people. Somehow, and I say this, it was bigger than me. All of it was bigger than me. I had no intention of doing anything of this scale. You know, the incident is that there's kids who hang out on the streets, and very similar, and probably to most third world countries where there are, you know, tourists, and their job is to hustle the tourists. You know, come, let me be your city guide. Let me show you around. And I met two boys, Rajesh and Ramu, and they were 9 and 11 at the time. And I shushed them away. I mean, pure Western style. Go away, don't need you. I'm cool, leave me alone. And they followed behind me, you know, the whole day. So I went back to the same village, Bhaktapur, many days in a row. And they were there, sitting on the curb at the gates of the medieval town, and we became fast friends. And I took them with me, and we went to a restaurant. And well, the things that stuck out for me was one of these boys took a serrated knife and kind of like did this over the top of the serrated knife. He'd never seen a serrated knife, and he took a cloth napkin and was like smelling it. You know, and those types of, you know, teeny little moments made me realize, wow, you know, this is really another world. It was not, I didn't have the idea that I was going to, you know, do something after leaving, you know, Nepal during that trip, except that I would put those two boys in school, which I did. I mean, I took a risk. I wired some money to a bank account. I had no idea. I figured it's good karma for me. They'll probably buy a bicycle or a leather jacket or something, and the money's gone. But they actually went to school. And a year and a half later, I went back to see them again and to meet their families, because I had never met their families. This was all done with handwritten letters, because there was no emailing at the time, and there really wasn't even electricity regularly in Bhaktapur at the time. And it was meeting the parents of one of these boys that kind of set Unatti on a course for what it is today. Move towards what it is now. Is, I mean, I as an individual sponsored those two boys, and I put 2 or 3 or more of their siblings in school, and I was just, as you know, a single photographer managing to put, you know, 7 kids in school by myself. And that a lot of people, my clients for the most part, and family, knew what I was doing. I'd be going back and forth, you know, about once a year, and just kind of had this passion project. And Ramu's mother needed a job. And they actually came to me and said, let's open a home for orphan girls. So it took my little passion project, and I created a nonprofit organization and registered in the States, and we registered in Nepal. and we were able to rent a home, a small place with about 6 rooms, and Ramu's mother became the house mother, and from the village that their family is from, which is in the eastern part of Nepal, they found 5 little girls, and who were in extreme poverty, extreme poverty. They all had a family member, because the family member had to agree to let the children go and be educated this way. And those 5 girls are still my daughters. In the program right now, we have 28 girls. Those are living in the home and who have graduated. Our core program is the actual home. We do not go wide, we go deep. They're with us for 15, 16 years. And I mean, we have one beautiful little girl she's 18 years old. Her mother committed suicide when she was very young from mental illness, and she was there. She remembers all of it. Her father had to work and gave her to us to care for. They live in Bhaktapur, so she can go visit anytime. The father's remarried, they have another child, and they live in one room, 2 twin beds, all of their belongings, their kitchen, their everything's all in one room, and it's just piled up of whatever they own in this very small little one room, and there's no space for her there. It's not appropriate for her to go live there with her stepmother and her little brother. And the legacy is to create something that they will have, to be able to carry on and have an impact in their own community, without needing the Westerners to be there, guiding them. Our first generation of girls is already caretaking extended family members, of their own families. So they're already having a big impact on, their immediate community. We do a lot of community service programs because I want it in their mind. Maybe you should go into service, not business. Find a profession in service and see how good it feels. And so we include that, from day one as our community service programs. And there's actually a child club run by our girls, and they get a small budget and decide what to do with it every year to have an impact in their community. And they've done all kinds of different distributions. They've done tree planting. They've done, we were running a tutoring program. A rural art program was brainstormed out of this team, where they wanted to take art to areas outside of the valley.
When after Osho had left the body and I had moved to be with Papaji Punjaji, the disciple of Ramana, up in Lucknow, he was just crystal clear. He said, this is your sadhana. You go there and you live in a cave on the banks of Ganga and you start this project. And what was so amazing to me was doing that and seeing how far $1 would go. I had never really done the math to see how many can you feed, how many can you medicate, how many can you educate. And once I wrapped my head around it and started doing it, then I asked friends. That's the whole thing of the project, is I've had incredible friends, have, just the backbone of the project is the love of friends. And I just reached out to friends all over the world and said, I need a round the world ticket and I need venues. Can you host me in your church, in your basement? Yoga wasn't really on the mat much yet, but a few. Can I come? I need to raise money. And people just opened their doors, their hearts, got me a ticket. And I came back with enough to start Ramana's. I knew nutrition had to be my #1 priority, and healthy nutrition. Can't educate children that are brain dead from malnutrition. You have to build their little minds and bodies up first. And then you can bring in the education, the awareness, ecology, environment. But the first thing you have to do is get those kids nourished. Ultimately, we put kitchen gardens in every village where there were children getting education. And that encompassed 68 villages initially. Some individuals have made donations, but no organization at all, ever in these 28 years. Now in America, yes, we had to set up a 501(c)(3), and wonderful, wonderful people. They donate their time and have for the last 25 years, so that we do have Ramanas registered, beautiful, fabulous people. And there had to be a society of them. So two of the members run a wonderful yoga school called Willow Street Yoga. The other one is that the project is run completely and totally by the older kids themselves now. And the project director is Gogan. And he came to me when he was 1 year old. And now he runs the entire project, so I can be away. So just seeing my kids step up in such a huge way, handling the entire project, for example, I would say the deepest gratification is seeing kids that had zero future, zero in the street, in the gutter, in the garbage, now flying airplanes and running projects and top sales person in a real estate company. And Ramana's Garden is a bubble, and it's a bubble of total equality, of love, of fairness, of expression. And there is no unkindness anywhere in our perimeter. I became aware of that.
Thank you, Laura. We've got other rich interviews. You just saw on the screen when Laura stopped it, a couple named Rob and Melissa, and these are people I've gotten to know through my contacts in the local, well, regional, global now yoga community, since COVID actually brought together a lot of people who otherwise wouldn't have known each other through offering yoga classes and chanting and so on. And we'll probably just have to have another opportunity to do this perhaps in the January session. I know Laura wants to come to the graduation, and hopefully Dibendu will join us there, and I'll be able to come up for the graduation as well. So why don't we pause here? And we didn't get that many questions in the chat, but there was a question about the emotional impact. Let me see, Roel, do you want to come on? Is he still here? Yes. Did I say your name correctly, first of all?
Well, it's Rule. Yeah, close enough.
Thank you.
Well, I was just interested in really the development of the founders and their emotional journey and what they understood as kind of maybe benchmarks in their own development.
Well, I would have to say, although I haven't met Dr. Dwaba, the interview we did with her, and Dibendu was on that interview as well. She was really in a spiritual crisis when she was in India back in the early 90s. And it was her gurus telling her, and this is, by the way, not uncommon. I mentioned Ram Dass. Many people in that community, including Steve Jobs, went to India and followed the guru of Ram Dass and so on, is this notion that there's some kind of destiny to fulfill. And so I believe when I see these pictures of her, and I'm eager to go, I've been to India once, but I didn't actually go to Ramana's Garden. She's so vibrant. She's got to be in her early 70s. And every time I see pictures of her, she's just glowing. And so this opportunity to really create something quite remarkable. And maybe Dibendu, you can talk a little bit about, like, when you see the impact. You got together with a group of about 15 of the young people who were there. It was during the holidays in December, so many people were gone, but the students, in India, Christmas is not Christmas break. So do you want to say a few things? And then maybe Laura, talk about, you had more time with Stephanie than I have.
Okay, if I may go. Yes, I was there in the interview, and if you rather read her history, which was like a little bit what's the right light to it? It was perhaps a little bit fast. She wanted to be in the movies. She was, I think, from Hollywood, and it was a failed career. Something of that kind happened. Perhaps there was something else also, and then she landed up in India. So from there, her development is like stark, and I wanted to do something like her. And when I told her that, look, I'm looking up to you, she was like so forthcoming. So we didn't really get that time to understand her emotional development. But frankly speaking, I'll just put it this way, I found her to be wonderful. Absolutely. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Laura, you have
Yeah, I think Stephanie kind of highlights that at the beginning of her interview, where she talks about, that it wasn't something that she had planned. She had no desire to do any of this. It was just something that kind of evolved, and that she experienced, this, desire to help these kids after going to India. And then it just kind of grew from there, her service and her commitment to these kids, and her heart just opened and kind of has been dedicated to kind of creating this beautiful space for these kids ever since, and it's been over 20 something years that she has been going back and forth to Nepal, multiple times a year, and getting donors. And so it's become her family, now those are her children. And it's not it's the selfless service that we're talking about, which is the seva. It's selfless service. There is no other, there's no agenda other than being of service to these youth and these communities. And that's what it's really about. And so beyond that, I think that, that's just her mission, is to serve them and to empower them to be the leaders of their own communities. And I think that is where we, when I first jumped into this project, I didn't know what we were doing. And I thought, okay, well, what are we looking at? Are we looking at, the founders? Are we looking at, what we talk about is, white savior complex, and through this process, I got to see how Westerners can be of service through selfless service, and how it works even in my own research is when communities and people come from the outside and they work with the communities on the inside. They give them the resources and the tools that they need to empower the community. So they're not coming in as white saviors. They're coming in as allies, and they're coming in to empower these communities. And that's what I really observed, is through this process, that they really are, there's an exchange of culture, and there definitely is an impact by bringing in the Western culture into this. But it's being done in a very equitable way that provides resources to these communities, and then gives them the opportunity to share that. So that's just what I observed through this process.
Let me add to Laura, one discussion I had with Stephanie. So I actually learned about Unatti through a fundraiser that a friend of mine had, and she's been over there numerous times. And I was mentioning Stephanie is not part of the local yoga and now global yoga community that I connect with, but I was telling her about Ramana's garden, and because Dr. Dwaba lives there and came as a yogini, there's much more integration of these practices. And Stephanie said to me, well, maybe you can help bring some of these back, because in many ways, there is a very Western orientation, having careers for girls, having education and so on. But that's still, that circle goes around, and then these young women and young men, because Ramana's garden is both males and females, they just, the value of giving is steep. And Oinak, who his picture was at the beginning of Debendu's slide, he was with Dr. Dwaba. He's in law school, and he has great ambitions to make changes in his country. So to say, what's the emotional development of these founders? They've created these communities on site, but there's this global sense of community and the outreach that these young people now feel that they're part of something much bigger than themselves, I think is quite profound.
Thank you.
Other observations or anything anyone would like to add or say about this? Some of you have been involved. I've had limited time to be involved because I was traveling the beginning of this month. So I haven't been able to go on other sessions except for one yesterday, and I'll join in again the climate session. But anything anyone wants to add or say about this entire conference now that we're on the final day?
Well, I guess I contrast, I attended the Navajo presentation a little earlier, and there was a tremendous emphasis on sovereignty. And I left that presentation kind of sensitized to this idea of others coming in and introducing their own thoughts and their own ideas, and how that impacts the idea of sovereignty. And I contrast that with this presentation, which seems somehow to have a different attitude about people coming in and offering their ideas and their resources. And I don't know where I land with that, but that contrast somehow strikes me as interesting and culturally important. And I guess I've gone, for example, to Bhutan to do work as an architect, and always felt very welcome there. But it never really occurred to me that I might need to tread more carefully. I was simply offering some expertise and my ideas, and it felt pretty clean. But of course, it's not necessarily so, and so it's just for me, I guess I'm just feeling very sensitized to the potential difficulties.
I can add maybe just my experience with this, because I that was one of my questions as we were going in, because of my research was looking at individuals from communities that were making changes in their own communities, and then going in and having Westerners come in. But what I found is that they are not that they are incorporating and celebrating the communities that are there. They're just offering resources to help the communities there. And so I think like Prabhuji talks about, like, if these kids hadn't been exposed to these programs, a lot of them came from, different slums and would not have opportunities that they were given. And definitely the girls at Unatti, them being exposed to having just the resource of education, because it is not a privilege that every child is educated. Education has to be paid for in these countries. They are not just given education. And so them